I'm going to actually try to get us going on step one, but I think we're going to need to just step back a bit because we need to have off of the state reps working on that. So we'll see how we do it by the year. So as I mentioned, we'll do the presentation on pre-monitoring, presentation on post-monitoring. So slide 4. So you will recall, just in terms of a recap, I'm not going to spend any time on this. We know what we're about in terms of our purpose, and we've been spending the last few weeks just making sure we're all on the same page about what we want to get input about. Now we will be moving into the stage of figuring out how to get input from our states, what the focus groups look like. So put together the document and figure out a communication plan. So on slide 6 at this point, as I mentioned today, we're going to be looking at the corrective action planning and the cycles and timelines. And the cycles include the post and the pre and post monitoring. So that hopefully will get a picture at this point. So let's move to the, we've seen this before in terms of the, I'm on slide 8, the grant monitoring cycle, the different stages. And today I'm going to look at stage 2, the monitoring, particularly that pre-monitoring process and time frames. That's what we're focusing on. And then we're going to go to stage 3, the post-monitoring. We've already looked at the final report last week, so today we'll talk about the TNTA and the corrective action. This way, I don't know if I've mentioned this before, and forgive me if I haven't, I'm repeating myself, but showing you these cycles and kind of pictures is ODS has its internal, it's called the source, but it's its internal, if you will, for being able to share information and collaborate on using the web. And so we built a separate grant monitoring site that really helps for OCS that staff can go to, and hasn't been formal launch, is being piloted at this point. But staff, for instance, can go and click on any of these circles and go to the part of the site that shows them what documents to use, how they get started, those kinds of things. So it's really kind of a guide making all of this a bit more efficient. Slide. All right, so let's jump into the pre-monitoring cycle on slide 10. A goal for looking at these cycles and to try to systematize this is to kind of the slogan behind it is one OCS. We want grantees to, have one look, get one, say that, it is OCS, it's not just LIHEAP, it's not CSBG, it's not the discretionary programs, it is one OCS. We want some consistency among all of the different divisions so that grantees can see some consistency. They get the same kind of information, the same kind of formatting between among the offices, as well as from year to year. You should be able to see things that are very similar from year to year. And also, obviously, this is a tool for staff. They don't have to create new letters each time. They don't have to reconfigure things. They should be able to use templates and be able to do this more efficiently. So all of this is, again, one OCS, hopefully helpful to grantees and hopefully helpful for staff. So 4 phases here: planning phase, communication phase, analysis, and then actual monitoring. So the phase obviously kicks off when we talked about the prioritization tool a couple of weeks ago. Decisions are made about what grantees to monitor and then the type of monitoring. And we're still working out some different types of monitoring besides just the on-site. But the goal is to publish a Dear Colleague letter within 30 business days of the decision. So the leadership of OCS says, okay, these are 10 or 20 or whatever number of grantees we're going to be monitoring. We send out a DCL, and they hope to do that within 30 days. And that would be more aggressive than they've done now, but that is the goal. Then from that, we move to the planning, where 10 days after those decisions are made and the DCL has gone out, deciding if they're going to do these on-sites. You know, is it going to be January, March, whatever the days are. They put, again, this is a place on the source, our internal website, where they can put a master schedule. So we see who's going there, when, if there's any things that are, you know, staying on toes or things should be done more jointly. And then those dates established, then staff go through the process of getting authorization for travel, and that requires having a preliminary agenda. So we've got a standardized agenda and send that all to you. It's still kind of being worked at. I should put out to everything I'm saying today. The you're seeing both the pre-monitoring and the post-monitoring are very much in flux. You are getting draft documents. But I don't want to wait to fill you all in until, you know, everything was done, because who knows what might be. And it's good to get feedback, you know, as we're proceeding. But some of this is still being worked on as we get it more together. We're sharing it with you. But we're standardizing a lot of this. And the preliminary agenda is no big deal. It basically, you know, okay, we're going to have the first meeting run through a PowerPoint, then we're going to meet, you know, it's those kind of a very general things so that the travel authorization can get cleared. Have staff initiating what we call a site visiting monitoring form. That's a very internal document, nothing the grantee will ever see, but it helps set the deadlines, and it really walks people through. Here's what you need to do first, second, third. So we got staff on the same page about what needs to happen. Obviously, everybody can see, because you can pull it up and see where everything's at. Then part of the planning phase, I'll also start working anytime now. We're asking staff to then pull all the information they have on that stage they plan to be monitoring. So they have this, we should have a state plan. We may have the last annual report. We may have other things, FFRs, whatever. Because we're not going to be asking for information we already have. We don't need to ask a state to give us their state plan again. Don't need to ask them anything already submitted. So that's part of what we're aiming for in the planning phase. Planning phase, we move to communication. The communication, and these, you know, overlap. I mean, you know, it's not sequential, absolutely, but on the communication phase, you contact the grantee about the schedule. So you've suggested that you've come up with a schedule up in planning, and now you have to make sure that the grantee, there's no, you know, big barrier, and we don't have to change it. But obviously, that's something that is happened. Then, once we get all that kind of squared away, I send the engagement letter, and I send you out. We're going to go over that in a minute. A draft kind of new engagement letter. That is pretty much out the window. As I said, we're in process. So what I sent you last week is already being scrapped. But we want to have an engagement letter. We're just going to shorten that. An engagement letter that can go out both to LIHEAP and CSBG. It just says, here it is, here are the dates, and then has some attachments. But the main thing is going to be standardized. In engagement letter, there's a attachment 1 that kind of explains the process. I sent that to you. That also is being revised. And yes, thank you. And the enclosure 2 is just a point of contact form. That's still being put together. It's no big deal. It's who's who and where they're located. And then enclosure 3, which we've already looked at last week, was the document request list. So at this point, we're trying to have a standardized engagement letter, 1-page letter, 1.5 at the most, that enclosures explaining what we're doing after some contact and asking for the documents. And then, of course, we also communicate with the grantee about logistics. So that's kind of the communication that happens there. On the analysis and follow-up phase, staff will be looking at the documents both that they've pulled that I already have internally, and also the documents that are sent based on request. Any other documents needed, that's when they will request it. And then it's also clear that staff, I'm getting feedback here, that staff will get, at this point is when staff asks for information from other offices. So, other divisions. If it's CSBG, maybe they want to ask LIHEAP, what do they know about this grantee? They might want to be talking to grants management. Are there any issues? They may want to be talking to Head Start. So whatever in ACF that might be of value in terms of looking at the grantee, that's when they're going to get it. If they're doing an on-site review, again, there may be some where it's not an on-site review. We're putting together, the final agenda. Again, going to be a template, but that will be the extent much more flexible because grantee to grantee is going to be a little different. And then we're putting together a PowerPoint to sort of walks people through the process. So we're working on those templates. So then the analysis and follow-up, and obviously we go to monitoring. And then that's, what that looks like, and then we'll be talking about post-monitoring. So that's the phase. Those phases, that's kind of what's being planned. Let me see what's on the next. Talked about, all right, so let me just see, 11. Let me just look at, okay. Oops, something just went, hey, sorry. Questions on the phases? Any comments?
Any questions? It makes sense to me.
Yeah,
okay.
Thanks.
Okay, I would spend much time. I'm not going to spend time on the documents I sent you because I will resend you some documents probably next week as we start to revise them. But I want to give you a sense as we are in the process of revising these. So let's go to the next slide here. Is it 11? Yeah, post-monitoring. Go one more slide. Okay. Let me turn this over to, I will walk you through this particular part of the cycle. Okay.
Well, I'm going to be talking about the post-monitoring cycle, and Kate is absolutely correct. Our office, this cycle that we have here, this is in a development stage. Some of it, of course, has been implemented, and then some is still in the development stage. Development stage meaning that we're streamlining processes, we're enhancing processes, and again, as Kate had mentioned, we're standardizing a lot of the benchmarks that we have previously done under. So I'll start with hopefully you can see it, the red circle. The red circle pretty much talks about prior to coming on site, we perform the prioritization, assessment. So we have a schedule, we prepare, we've provided your office with the engagement letter. We've also provided you with the document request list, identifying what documents to review. We do the pre-monitoring. So once all that is planned, we then are on site. And the on-site review, of course, as you know, we perform various testings. We go to the various eligible entities, walk through sometimes site visits. That exit conference occurs, then we're back in the field. So after the on-site review is performed, we then will begin to prepare our fieldwork testing or complete our fieldwork testing. After the fieldwork testing is completed, and I should preference after the fieldwork testing is completed, we will begin the monitoring report. In the past, a lot of times we were still waiting documents, which did cause delay in sometimes getting the report out. So we're trying to stay within the parameters of our performance requirements. So any documents, any documents that we're still waiting for, and we see where that is causing some delay, we will probably start putting that in the report that we had not received documents or we're waiting for further documents, and we're not able to finalize our final review of that area that we tested. That be noted in the report, but that's for discussion that's currently in progress. After we complete the fieldwork testing, the monitoring report is prepared. The cycle that you have here pretty much talks about the report and some of the components associated with the report. So the purple, the next button, talks about the initial monitoring report. The initial monitoring report, this is when we are allowed between 30 to 45 days to write the report for the issuance or for the report to be issued to the grantee. The blue circle highlights that after you receive the report, then your office has 30 days to review and comment. So we're allowing 30 days for the comment period meaning that you would go and review the report. If you accept the report with comments, then of course you definitely send it back within 30 days. But if you have comments or you do not accept the findings that have been noted in the report, then you have no later than 30 days to respond to our office as it relates to the report. And let me preference the first report that we will send out is what we call the initial report. They do the draft report, but we're calling it the initial report, so your office will receive the initial report for a comment period of 30 days. The orange circle talks about our review of your report along with the comments. So if you, for instance, did not accept a finding, then there is the block below talks about, and I'll just read it in case you can't, in case it's not legible. But anyway, so for disallowed findings, there will be a template language in the final report that requires repayment in 30 days. That's if we find disallowed costs. You have within 30 days to repay, or written appeal. So there is also a appeal process for your office to appeal within 60 days. And the note that's noted there, that's more of an internal, I guess, a reportable item that we have for our office internally in terms of where any disallowed or will go as far as a monitoring report, a final monitoring report. Back to the orange circle, after we review the initial report, we have 30 days to send out the final monitoring report to your office. The red and the green talks about timelines as it relates to corrective action. So, for example, if there are going to be corrective actions, then the red button highlights that it's given 45 days to respond to respond in writing with a corrective action plan. So once we find the report, then you have 45 days to provide us with a corrective action plan. From there, once we receive the corrective action plan, we then have to respond back to your corrective action plan, that's the green button, within 15 days to respond back to your office in the form of a letter. And also, we will also notify, this is internal purposes only, any TNTA assistance that we need to arrange with other partners in terms of providing training and technical assistance. And with the post-monitoring cycle, like any cycle, there is a closeout process, and that process will occur, where the program office will issue a closeout letter to the grantee stating that the closeout is complete. For purposes of our reporting, that information, what we find with the status of the correction action plan, will then be a part of some risk factors that we will be using in the prioritization tool. I went through that kind of quickly, but I want to go to the next slide that talks a little bit more about the corrective action request. You can click one more.
Alicia, before you do that, let me interject just two quick things. on the cycle that occurred to me. One, I just want to clarify, and you did mention on the initial monitoring report, the 30 to 45 days that OCS is committed to providing the initial report. The reason it says 30 and 45 is the 30 days really applies to the CSBG monitoring. So that aligns with the federal accountability measures. 45 days is what LIHEAP and some of the other offices are requiring. So CSBG is kind of pushing the envelope there a little bit, but that's why we have the 30 to 45 days. And I also want to mention to folks that in terms of the closed letters, the accepting the corrective action plan, all of those kinds of letters, we're trying to, again, do templates, things that will be consistent between programs. So, and we're trying to systematize that. And I know that now, I'm just going to go over the corrective action, the TNTA, but one of the main things that's kind of new with post-monitoring cycle is more of a focus on tracking the corrective actions are completed, that there are deadlines. We're looking at that. And also, because this is something the partners have often been concerned about, is CS may see some issues that are common or whatever, or not even common, but some issues with the grantee after, having done the on-site that they think could be resolved by giving some often the partners aren't kind of included in the loop. So we've set up a system, that's what we're going to go over now, that really has the OCS staff contacting the partners and make sure that there's a connection there. The TTA is provided that's connected to what was found in the monitoring. So with that, go ahead, Alicia.
Okay. If it may be easier that you actually, if you have a notebook or a computer available, you may want to open up the corrective action TNTA tracker form. That may be easier for you to, if you're not.
We have it up on the screen. Yeah,
okay.
We have it up on the screen.
Okay,
yeah.
That's even better. Okay, so the purpose of this form is to begin to develop or have some type of formalized process, putting up capturing information observed and noted in the monitoring reports. So we, our staff, and of course Kate, we all went through the form to determine what's the best way of tracking any corrective action issues or any possible TNTA training to mitigate any potential findings in the future. So what we did is created this form, and if you look at the form, a lot of the form is driven a lot of times off of drop-down box. The top form pretty much kind of captures the profile, the the background of the state and the pro-specialist trip that was performed the year of that particular engagement. So if the scope period is 2017, we'll note that under the fiscal year. The second part of the form talks about the corrective action. So as I mentioned earlier, if findings were noted, usually it's like maybe on the third page, so we like to bring to your attention in the report so it's easier to understand, okay, let me find out what are the issues. So those findings were noted, we will identify the finding with an identifier number, so that area that's called finding number, that has some disallowed costs. So we noted that as finding 1, we'll note that as finding 1. The finding label will talk about it's specifically disallowed costs. This form is also going to be used for reporting purposes, so it's easily able to be filtered. So that's why we have the label, so we can identify the type of finding. The finding of non-compliance, we will reference the details surrounding the finding that we noted in terms of what was the issue, what was the, the purpose, and what was how the finding occurred. All that information would be uploaded here. So you say to yourself, okay, well, let's add 4 findings. How identify the additional findings? Well, if you look below, it says click on insert item to another issue non-compliance. So as many findings that were noted in the report, by clicking that button, then that's where that information can be populated to the findings. Now, as it relates to the corrective action, again, we're still in the process of enhancing this form. So some of the filter or headers may change. So we have a finding tracker that's going to be the corrective action. So you've noted the corrective action issue. So where it says collating number, that pretty much means that's referring to if it was a disallowed cost, it is corresponding back to finding number 1.1. And of course, it's going to be disallowed cost. The name of the finding, we determine, what was related to, the topic of the finding, and the finding lead. So we identify all that information in the first section of this finding tracker. Then we will then begin to populate the corrective action based on the corrective action plan and the implementation of when the finding was corrected, when was it implemented. We all note that as far as the response date, the required action. So we have a trail, so we're transparent in terms of the corrective action. All that information is captured there. Your next step. So, for example, let's say a finding was still worked on, because in some cases, some findings may take 3 years to complete. So we have a section that's called next steps. So one will know exactly what needs to be done to correct the finding, or what other issues are outstanding with that finding. We have some resolve dates and due dates. So we have benchmarks that we also have to be accountable for. So that is additional information that we use for also internal purposes. After the final report has been issued and we have determined that there may be some TNTA that's needed, then this pretty much is handled also by the program specialist in terms of making some recommendations. So then the host will work together to ensure that the recommended TNTA provider is available for the training, and describe what type of training is going to be needed. So if let's say that there's new management or new staff and familiar with how to complete invoices or how to even track the expenditures of the dollars and what to be allowable and paid for through the CSBG funds, then that information, there may need to be a TNTA training on that area. Or there's an FFR. So the FFR, Federal Financial Reporting Form, for whatever reason that was not or was not recorded properly, there may need to be specific training in FFR, especially for the final FFR. So that may also be captured as a form of TNTA training. I don't know if you can scroll further down, but we will just identify all the training needs associated to for that corrective action or that finding that was noted. So then in the future, if we see where there is, we want to also use this form benchmarks for future that are coming across the same issues. So at least this form is noted. We can maybe reference back to this form and then see what was recommended in terms of the corrective action and also training. So hopefully the purpose of this form, again, is to identify appropriate TNTA, make the necessary corrective actions requested, and to collaborate and connect closer to the parts that are out there. Is there any questions with respect to either the post-monitoring cycle, or the form, the corrective action or TNTA form?
This is Jake. I don't have any questions. I think you explained it well.
I agree. This is Beverly.
All right.
The Corrective Action and TNTA tracker form is strictly for you, your OCS, right?
Correct.
It's for internal purposes. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah. I just want to give you a sense that there's much more focus now on identify the corrective action. Let's track when it's due. If we get a response, we don't want to just leave it hanging. And then use that. We can slice and dice this information and see what's happening out in the field, and also use that, feed it into the assessment process. And on the TNTA, we want to be able to connect to the providers and also be able to get feedback from the grantees on was the TNTA useful, et cetera. So we're trying to just be more thoughtful and thorough and consistent about that whole process. I just want to give you a sense of that.
I guess you have maybe one question. So in that light blue circle where you've done the 30 days, you sent something out to the grantee, they have 30 days to respond. They back some information, and it says monitoring staff reviews, grantee feedback, and sends out final monitoring report. Would be a time where in that blue circle where they've sent something, you may accept something that was sent and change the information before sending out the final report, or?
I hear what you're saying, but can you elaborate more so just so I can provide clarifying?
So say that the finding was that something wasn't in the file when you looked at it around like vacancies or something, I don't know.
Okay.
So we sent back and said, oh, well, here's stuff that we have then, couldn't show you, but we had it, here it is. Would you take that information and change the final report in light of it, or?
That's a good question. Since we are under, I guess, I don't want to say it's an isolated case, but we're really trying to adhere to the timelines that we have established within our within the ACSI survey. So that being said, I guess it all depends upon what it was, because remember I was mentioning earlier that we understand when we're out in the field, you know, sometimes things are misunderstood, or we need further clarification or even further documentation. So that's why we all in our exit conference to indicate that this is not the finalized fieldwork completion, and we will do further testing. So in a lot of cases, in that situation, in most cases, we will sometimes even contact the state to let them know that, you know, prior to the initial report, these are the issues that we've noted, and if you have any additional information prior to this, please send it. Now, so if it's after then we will then make probably adjustments within the final report to either clarify any misinformation or misstated information.
Yeah, that's the most important piece, Alicia, is that the final report will changes based on what the grantee says. That's the whole point of the grantee, either accept or dispute or provide clarifying information. So if you have clarifying information, that's just a finding, of course that will be changed. That's the whole point of giving that 30 days and then giving OCS another 30 days to make those changes before it's finalized. I think what we're trying to do, though, is not, because there have been instances where you go back and forth and, you know, 2 years later we're still, you know, looking at information. So we're trying to at least, nail down the time frame, but certainly allowing for flexibility.
And I thought that was your intent. And the only reason I brought it up, and I'm not trying to go down a rabbit hole, but just had monitoring. There was some very good points made right at the beginning of the session, and I made changes like immediately as a result of the conversation. And when I got my letter, it said, respond to these things. So I sent back a response and said, well, we already made all of those changes, like immediately at the point that it was sent, and didn't hear anything back. And I know you're making improvements to that process with this, so I didn't hear anything back on that. And then the letter came out and it didn't reference any of those things. So I think that is an important step. Like if you get that information back and it is valid, able to make those changes and light additional information if you can. But I definitely understand, Alicia, what you're saying on sticking to your time frames.
And to elaborate more on that, so in that case, I can only speak about the future going forward. Then if you made the changes, a lot of times we will note, although we did see where, let's say, this process was not performed during the scope period of review. However, the state has made take steps to make formalized their processes, and so we will go into the report and sometimes stress and reference that or express that. So that's a good point to be made. So I'll continue to note that and share it with our group.
Okay, I appreciate it because it actually was valuable information that we received, and we actually used it. So it was
and that's good. Yeah, good to see that everybody used it. Right, exactly. Questions on this? Okay, let's go into the much concludes, everything we've tried to brief you on. As I mentioned, as we get to draft influence some of these documents, we'll share those with you. But those are really substantial, as much as to say they are, templates and communication vehicles. So let's get to next steps. And I think we can lay this out a little bit, get your feedback, but may have to wait and schedule another time when we actually start work, because I think it would be important to have Lauren and Chris on the call, as opposed to just the three of you. So what we're thinking in terms of next steps, and this is not something set in stone, and we still have to work out a few of the details. But now that you've heard everything and you have a sense of what we're looking at, you've seen the ACSI, you know what the concerns are, the concerns raised, and then for the new processes and documents, we have to figure out among ourselves, what is it we want to learn? What do we want to find out from the other states? And figure out some priorities. Is it this process or that process or this cycle or these letters? What are the main things we want to get feedback on? And we need to discuss and decide the focus groups, type of participant, how that might work. Now, there is one caveat. Janelle George, the OCS acting director, is to establish if there are any parameters we have to worry about. I'm going to be talking to her and see if there's any issues, and we'll figure out how to deal with that. Once we figure out what is it we want to learn, how many focus groups, who's in those focus groups, and we develop some scripts. We develop a template for taking notes. Obviously, we'll record some of this, but we need to kind of get organized around that. We can then decide on roles and sticks in terms of the time frames and getting those focus groups set up. We then have to conduct the focus groups. We then have a discussion, what did we learn, what did we hear, what's important, and then writing up those observations and conclusions with any recommendations we have. Science, but that's pretty much kind of what the steps are. And then the slide showed up, wait a minute, I'm having a little issue here, 21. See, step one, it's having a discussion among all of us about what is it we want to learn, what do we want to find out, what do we want to ask the state. You know, what priorities? We have to have the topics, have you write up some questions depending on those topics, and then bring those with the team and discussing. I think step one is we need to hold on step one. Another time when all 5 of you can be on the phone, and then we can go over this. But let me go back to the those next steps. Do these make sense to people? Any questions about it? Any suggestions? Anything?
To change anything, or
yeah, do these steps make sense? Is there anything you think I'm missing? Is there done this? I mean, in terms of we're going with this all. Pretty follow what we said in the work. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to me. I'm reading through to make sure I don't.
Yeah, this is Greg.
So I just want to, we know what the work in front of us is. So I think probably for today we are done. We aren't going to have the discussion about the top of the priorities, but maybe for those of you that are on the phone, and we can be in touch with Lauren and Chris, we can do later, Jackie, is for you to begin thinking about, okay, everything that you've heard over the last 3 weeks of these briefing sessions. What else stuff stands out? What is it we need more information from the grantees about? Where do we want to get feedback? Getting, so that we can then on our next call have a discussion about, okay, what do we do next? And then once we figure that out, then we can make assignments, and you can start kind of thinking about the questions and what we would be asking. So if that makes sense, and if there's, so I want to ask if that makes sense, and if there are any other questions, otherwise I don't want to waste any further time. We'd be done. So, although I want to ask one other thing at the end, but are there any other questions?
Nope.
This is the way to go? All right. So then there's 2 other things then. The meeting schedule. Monday mornings every other week still good? Or is a problem for folks? I know we need to talk with Lauren and Chris too, but are these, it seems that this time works. But I know summer's coming up, and sometimes Fridays are not as good for folks. They don't want to be tied up with meetings on Fridays. So give me a sense from the 3 of you, how are you thinking about Fridays?
Fine for me.
Yeah, Fridays.
Yeah, Fridays also.
Okay, so then we'll just stick with the Fridays. And the question would be, the next Friday that we might be talking would be, let's see, the 18th. And I'd be if would be I'll throw it out to you. Do we want to wait 2 weeks, or do we want to get going and start on the 11th? Not doing it today and do it on the 11th. I'll go with what your all sense is.
I would prefer the 18th. This is Greg.
Okay.
And
Can't on the 18th. Sorry, I understood I like Fridays, but that is the only Friday that I definitely have something. If you want to, yeah. Sorry.
No, I really need all 5 people on. So let me do this. Let's Beverly and Greg, are you available on the 11th?
Well, I make myself available. I mean, there's another meeting that I would like to attend, but if you schedule a meeting for the 11th, I will attend.
I will do the same.
Okay. Is there a time on the 11th that you prefer?
This is a good time.
Okay. All right. So let's then go for the 11th, if we can also get Lauren and Chris. And my main concern for the next meeting is that we're all on the phone. That critical conversation we need to have together. Otherwise, I think some follow-on conversations, we can probably do it with fewer than all of us on the phone. Okay, so Jackie and I can work that out. So 11th, same time. All right, my final question before we sign off, I just want to get a sense from you all, feeling about this, how we're doing, anything you'd prefer differently, anything we can improve in terms of how we're working together. I want to just get some feedback on that. Anything? Pluses, minuses, anything?
This period, definitely, I had plenty of time to review documents, which was helpful.
Good.
I think that providing the background has been really helpful.
Time, Matt said, yeah, I had time to actually read, so, yeah.
Having Alicia deliver the presentations.
And Alicia, your woman's work, this is a lot of extra work she said, and we appreciate that, Alicia.
Thank you.
Anything you wish you had, anything?
I feel like I'm in.
Okay, you understand. That's helpful. That's what we need, is if you understand, then we can proceed. Okay, so we're looking our next meeting on the 11th, next week, again, 10 o'clock. We'll be in touch with Lauren and Chris and have some discussion about some next steps. Hope you have a great weekend.
And well.
You guys too.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Jackie?
Yep.
What a phone.